Hello everyone, welcome to MediaNama. Recently, Reliance Jio made headlines for urging the telecom regulator to conduct auctions for satellite spectrum. This is in opposition to the suggestions made by other telcos such as Airtel and Vodafone Idea and even Amazon satellite communication project Kuiper, who all urged for administrative allocation of satellite spectrum. We are joined by MediaNama's founder Nikhil Pava to make sense of these diverging opinions on spectrum allocation. Hi Nikhil. So could you start us off by giving us your inputs on why Geo might be suggesting auctions for satellite spectrum?
I'm not sure why Geo want auctions for satellite spectrum, because satellite spectrum actually auctions end up costing people more money instead of a standard price, right? It's a bidding war to some extent for telecom operators. Mostly, it's a race to the bottom because everyone's trying to outdo each other. And I think we've only had one auction in the past where not enough bids came in and the auction process failed. Um, and that was the auction post the 2G scam, I think, simply because the reserve price was too expensive. Um, Administrative allocation of spectrum is actually an interesting, tricky kind of situation, because the allegation in the 2G scam was that there was administrative allocation, and I remember at that time one of the allegations was that the date uh, for accepting applications was changed. So only certain applications that met the cutoff date were accepted. And I think some people had prior knowledge, and therefore their applications got accepted in at the time the 2G scam happened. Now, there was this theory that there was, some 16 one, I mean, some lakhs of thousands of crores of rupees that was lost because an auction didn't take place. We need to remember that the cost that was a notional number that was put out, and it became the basis of the scam. But really, to my mind, at that time, the story was really the date change that happened that kept certain people out and allowed certain people in. Now, administrative allocation can actually be much cheaper for players. And it depends on whether satellite spectrum is more expensive to roll out, because there is no existing infrastructure for India for satellite spectrum. And I know Airtel with OneWeb has been working on it for a while. But just, at times when an ecosystem is starting up, it helps to keep the costs low so that players can roll out, there can be competition, consumers can benefit, and that market can achieve scale. Whereas one of the other things with this kind of an approach is that if there are also too many participants, then the whole ecosystem kind of becomes a mess, because sometimes communication between entities is, there are interconnection issues, etc. That happens mostly on mobile. The interesting one over here is that Starlink wants to participate in this, and looks like so does Amazon. And there is the thing with the controversy around Starlink has been about Elon Musk's actions in Ukraine, and now his offer for internet access in Gaza. And so you can play politics with internet access. And so one push from telecom operators could also be that we don't want a foreign entity to sort of run auctions. But let's not forget that there are most Indian telecom operators do have a significant semblance of foreign ownership. So I don't see why allowing a foreign player in the country should be a problem. Like the Vodafone was a foreign player. There was 100% FDI in telecom. And now Vodafone Idea has a significant Vodafone stake. Airtel has always been backed by Singtel. So, these are, so this controversy around Musk coming in and how he might behave, if your regulatory requirements and standards are strong enough, where you're in a position to basically exclude that access if someone violates your license conditions, then you have a certain degree of control as a country over internet access. And the lack of reliability and the kind of behavior we're seeing in Ukraine perhaps would not be here. Um, the other controversy around that has been that Jio has asked for allocation of USO fund to satellite spectrum, right? And I think we need to be conscious that the USO fund is primarily meant for rolling out um like telecom infrastructure, and satellite communication is a part of telecommunications. Um, but I'm not sure whether it necessarily needs to be allowed to enable satellite players in the space when you already have a situation in hills, etc., where there isn't that great connectivity. Sometimes in between cities, also connectivity isn't that great. In small towns and villages, at times connectivity isn't that great, right? So uh, we need to deploy the USO fund in improving access to the internet and bringing cost of telecom down. I'm not sure about the USO fund being deployed here, but the USO fund has a lot of money. They have, I think, about 75,000 odd crores yet to be spent of the approximate 140,000 crores that they've already collected from consumers like you and me. So it's a part of our cost. We've already paid for it. The fact that it's not being deployed is a problem. Um, what we also need conscious of is where do we deploy this money? And I would say that existing telecom operators should not get this. In fact, I'm skeptical about allowing existing telecom operators like Airtel and Jio in that space because Jio is already the largest mobile operator. They are a significant player in wireline. Airtel is the second largest mobile operator. They are amongst the largest players in wireline, right? So you have dominant players in both um, internet access via telecom and internet access via wireline. Do you want the same dominant players in internet access via satellite? And look, incumbents always try and play a game where they try to keep out new entrants because competition impacts their profitability. Maybe we need more competition in broadband because now telecom operators are basically engaging in rent-seeking behavior, where they're trying to, impose network usage fees on internet service providers. And perhaps the TRAI needs to then do a study on market concentration in broadband access and make a recommendation that enables more competition in broadband access because there may be hundreds of ISPs, but really there are only a few that are dominant. And auctions of satellite spectrum will actually enable further dominance from those um, that are willing to spend more money to maintain their duopoly, so to speak, as opposed to new entrants that basically want to come in and acquire new customers from scratch.
Bring your attention here to one thing that Amazon said in its filing because it's very close to what you are saying already. So in a
Okay.
foot in
I,
Amazon,
I haven't read their filing, but this is interesting.
yeah, so in their filing, in a footnote, they've mentioned and they're trying to create a case for um, administrative allocation of satellite spectrum. They say even in India, it may be argued that auctions have not necessarily promoted competition in the telecommunication sector. So I think their argument is fairly similar to the point you're
No,
making.
and that's true, right? Because someone with deeper pockets will always win. It's a race to the bottom. That cost gets transferred to customers.
Right. Yeah.
So if the government of India can make a case for zero MDR in digital payments in order to bring the cost of digital payments down, so that it gets used even more, there is also a case for no spectrum auctions to bring the cost of internet access down for consumers. Because the more you charge telecom operators, the more they will charge customers. They have to maintain profitability. There is a high degree of debt in this space, but telecom operators are hugely profitable. I mean, because of the consolidation in the market, you're now down to largely two two major players. Airtel's user base, revenue, profitability has gone up in multiples over the last 5 years because other telecom operators have declined, right? And this is despite Jio coming in. They're actually more from a margins perspective, EBITDA margins perspective, they're more profitable now than they were 6 years ago. So telecom operators are actually, from just an operational standpoint, extremely healthy in terms of how they're in terms of profitability, and they are extremely dominant. So they have basically monopoly control over the market.
Another point that I wanted to highlight from Amazon's filing was that they've talked about how satellite communication is essential for rural areas or areas where terrestrial networks cannot reach. And as we know, the purpose of the USO fund is to provide connectivity to those specific areas. So while I understand your point about not providing these funds to existing telecom companies, what's your perspective on newer entrants in the satellite space who will provide connectivity to these specific areas that the USO fund aims to cater towards with funds from the fund? Yeah.
So the where I would like to see that money go is in basically enabling, for example, community Wi-Fi networks. And there are some parts of the world where community Wi-Fi networks are fairly successful. I'd like to see those funds going in furthering wireline internet connectivity, because once your infrastructure investment in wireline internet connectivity is made, and that's what the government has rightly done with BharatNet, um, your cost of providing higher bandwidth actually goes down. Your operating cost of internet access is the lowest when it comes to wireline connectivity. Your ability to provide better bandwidth is actually much lower. And we found this out in a conversation with Professor Park a month or so ago as well. It's the wireless and the satellite part which is more expensive in terms of internet access. I do get the point that there are hilly areas and rural areas where internet access, where putting, let's say, wireline networks or optical fiber networks is much more expensive. But that's where I would like to see BharatNet go. I would also like the TRAI to consider unbundling uh, last mile access. Uh, that reduces cost of access for ISPs in terms of infrastructure. In fact, there were multiple joint ventures between telecom operators to set up infrastructure companies to bring down individual cost of internet access. So those systems have also, I mean, those market machinations have also existed. There is TV white space spectrum. There is 6 GHz spectrum. There are multiple spectrum bands that can be delicensed as well, and that reduces internet access cost, and that can also serve hilly areas and rural areas as well, right? So I think we need to create an environment for more players to come in, for more players to compete. Um, I'm not sure whether satellite spectrum is the most uh, inexpensive form of deployment or the most efficient form of deployment of the USO fund. So I'm not in a position to figure out whether it's more expensive or not. But I think that's a consideration that needs to be made before giving this money to new entrants, to be honest.
Thanks, Nikhil. Those are the questions I had for you today. Thank you to everyone who watched our video. And you can read more about our coverage on satellite spectrum on our website.